I never forget a face.
I know you don't. And in years to come, you might find yourself revisiting a few, but just the old favorites, eh?
What? You know, I swear the BBC times these kinds of announcements just to mess with my entire day. So I know lots of people got their hot takes and responses out yesterday when the news was announced, but you know, I'm busy and I got crap that I'm trying to do, like trying to get my new computer sorted. It's here, it's set up, but you know, I had to get all the software updated on it, make sure it had all the things I needed on it. Some of the software from my old laptop wasn't working well, so I had to update stuff and like it's been a thing. Anyways, we need to talk about Doctor Who and the new old showrunner now in charge, because BBC officially announced yesterday that Russell T. Davies, the man who brought back Doctor Who in the modern era, way back in 2005, is coming back to showrun. Obviously, this is kind of huge and not something that I at least saw anybody even clocking as a vague possibility. I mean, you know, I had my own video that I did, because I had gotten information that indicated they were looking at Sally Wainwright. I know a lot of people were really in favor of J. Michael Straczynski taking over. He was kind of lobbying for the job, and there was word that the BBC actually met with him. And I'm not going to say I never heard anybody say, oh, it should be Davies, but that was almost always like this weird nostalgic, oh, wouldn't it be nice if he came back? I never heard anybody say it as if they actually thought it was a possibility it would happen. And so it's now happened, and it's kind of blindsided everybody. My own thoughts on this are kind of mixed. So first of all, I'll reiterate the fact that I'm not really sad that Chibnall's leaving. While I have not been completely absent of things to like during his era, his overall approach hasn't really panned out particularly well for me, and most of the episodes that I don't like are actually written by him. So my thoughts on Chibnall going out, you know, I'm not as spiteful or as celebratory at the idea of him leaving as some people are, but I certainly wasn't bemoaning it. But now the idea of bringing back someone who ran the show previously is, on the one hand, exciting because of the specifics of who we're talking about. But on the other hand, in the broad strokes and the general idea, has me very concerned. So why don't I start with why it's kind of exciting? Because Davies, it's not like he's been sitting around doing nothing. Like, just to make a comparison, because there's no one else for me to compare it to, if they were to say try and bring back Moffat, first of all, I'm not sure Moffat's been gone long enough for people to miss him specifically. Even people who didn't like Chibnall, I don't think too many of them were calling for the return of Moffat. And more to the point, while I'm not going to say he hasn't been doing anything since he left Doctor Who, his output has been very much in keeping kind of what's standard for him, and he hasn't done all that much of note. At least I kind of don't think so. Whereas Davies has been very busy. He has been doing all sorts of things, and most importantly, I think, really feels like he's grown and changed as an artist since he was the showrunner for Doctor Who. He's done things like Years and Years and It's a Sin. He's really kind of dug deep into some real heartbreaking and dark places. Not that I necessarily want him to bring that kind of darkness to Doctor Who, but I'm saying that he hasn't been staying put. He hasn't been treading water as an artist. So with him specifically, I actually get a little bit more excited because it's him, more so than I would in terms of the general premise. I'll talk about my issues with the general idea of an old showrunner coming back in a little bit. So what's exciting with him specifically is I don't have as much of a fear that he's just going to try and recapture what he did before. I don't think he would have come back if all he felt that he was either capable of doing or that the BBC would allow him to do would be to just give us more of the exact kind of thing he was doing previously. I think he's got too much clout and too much artistic ambition to come back if that was the case. If he either thought he had nothing to add or if he thought the BBC was going to restrain him and basically say, look, don't do new stuff, do the old stuff that people already like. Now, granted, that's supposition on my part. It is distinctly possible, especially given the fact that he's bringing back his old producing partners, that maybe once he's back with that creative team on this kind of property again, it will bring back the kind of artistic instincts that he may have otherwise moved on from. That's possible. I have, as I said, a little bit more confidence than I might otherwise that I don't think that's going to happen. However, I do have my broad concerns about the fact that it's happening at all. Because the idea of bringing back an old showrunner, okay, so there are basically two perspectives that I'm going to address in this part. Looking at where it makes 100% total perfect sense, but why it makes me concerned anyways. So from a strictly business IP management sense, in terms of what is the best thing for this intellectual property as far as the business end of things, this is basically perfect. This is the BBC's ideal solution on a silver platter because, you know, regardless of what anyone thinks specifically about the Chibnall era, whether they liked it, whether they loathed it, you cannot ignore the fact that it sure as heck was divisive. Now, I'm always one to point out that the Doctor Who fandom has always had disagreements amongst itself from well before I've been here and well before Chibnall came along. But those things have gotten harsher. Now, I'm not necessarily going to say that's Chibnall's fault, but business management side is going to look at that and go, okay, how do we come back from this very divided time? And again, from a business perspective, the best thing to do is to bring back someone who made it exciting and got people on board in the first place. Because, look, it's unlikely that anyone who stuck around through the Whittaker era or who jumped on board during it and liked it is going to suddenly bail because of Davies showing up. And he's probably about the only person they could put in who would bring in the most people who bounced off the show during Chibnall's era. Now, that's not to say that they wouldn't have come back if it was, say, J. Michael Straczynski or Sally Wainwright or any number of other people, Toby Whithouse, who the heck knows. But I think there would have been a little bit more hesitancy there. There would have been a little bit more, okay, but I'm not sure what they're going to do and maybe it won't be any better. Whereas Davies has a body of work specific to Doctor Who, and it's the kind of excitement that, honestly, people had about Moffat when he was first announced because his existing body of work in Doctor Who was extremely beloved at the time he took the show over. And so this is kind of getting that same pop, and I don't think any other name, creative name, would give the BBC and the show the same pop from the fans as bringing back Davies. And so from a business perspective, this has the possibility of calming the fans down and getting everybody back on board, or at the very least, getting way more people than might have otherwise done so the incentive to come in and give Series 14, or whatever they end up calling it, a chance under Davies. Now, as I said, it makes total sense from a business perspective of IP management. From a creative perspective of IP management, this is why I am a little bit nervous and a little bit antsy. Again, not about Davies specifically. I think I'm fairly confident that he's going to do something interesting, and I don't think he's going to fall back on just regurgitating what he did before. But the very mentality at the BBC, at the people making the hiring decisions, that would lead to the decision to bring back an old showrunner at all, that mentality makes me nervous. I think that one of the most frustrating ways for a piece of entertainment, a long-running narrative, a well-established, long-running narrative piece of entertainment is to just start looking back and to spend endless amounts of time trying to recapture its old glory. And again, from a business perspective, trying to recapture the old glory is a really good thing. But from a creative perspective, and for the sake of not having the thing stagnate creatively, that makes me nervous. Again, not because I think Davies himself will do that, but because if that's the mentality of the people making the hiring decisions right now on the of who is going to get to run the show, what else might they do? Or what else might they encourage? It's the kind of thing that honestly frustrated the heck out of me with the Star Trek franchise for a long, long time. And honestly, these days, I see way more enthusiasm for Star Trek than I have in ages. And it's partly because that these days they're actually doing new stuff, like properly new stuff. They did some interesting things with Discovery. Picard is finally set further in the future. Lower Decks is a completely different beast altogether, but still feels like Star Trek. It is finally moving forward instead of trying to look back at what it used to be and go, well, how do we get that back again? Well, let's reboot it as movies and like, oh, well, that's not working. And there was a real sense of desperation to Star Trek for a while, and I don't want that for Doctor Who. It's also, honestly, part of why I bounced off of reading monthly comic book issues. Because ultimately, no matter where things went, good or bad, almost everything would eventually get rolled back. Now, granted, in that case, I'm kind of talking about retcons, and that's not really what I mean, but it's that same mentality. This idea of, okay, we've gone in a direction, but let's put it back where it was. Whether you do that literally in terms of a full status quo and continuity reset, or whether you do it philosophically in terms of how you approach the material, that will always make me nervous. I am on record in a video as saying that I don't think it would be worth it to retcon The Timeless Child. Now, I'll explain why I'm bringing this up in a second, and just to reiterate, I hate The Timeless Child. I absolutely hate that decision. But I don't think that it's worth it for the show to get so hung up on its own past for a future showrunner to try and retcon it or fix it. That's not where the energy should go. The energy should be going towards moving forward, not looking back. Now, there are still things to be benefited from the past. You can look at what did or didn't work. You can look at, okay, well, here's a character or a story or whatever worth revisiting. That's okay to a point, but literally trying to go back and be like, okay, no, we need to make it like it was before. That's an unhealthy mentality for the lifespan and the lifeblood, the creative lifeblood of any intellectual property, not just Doctor Who, any of them. And again, it's not that this specific decision makes me think we're screwed and it's all going to be navel gazing from here on out. But I worry about the mentality that it signals of what else might happen later. And I try not to get too doom and gloom about it, but that is where my head's at right now. Do I think that we're screwed? No, not necessarily. I mean, people change in terms of who the decision makers are. So even this mentality that I'm talking about at the BBC may not be that long-lived, if it's there at all. But the thought's still there in my head. And I still worry about that happening because Doctor Who, and I've said it before, possibly more than any other property, has the ability to self-refresh without having to do things like massive retcons and rollbacks of the narrative. Doctor Who, more than any other show I know, has the ability to always move forward. And the idea that it would ever stop and start looking back instead, I just don't think would be good for it. And I think long-term, fans wouldn't like it either. It's the kind of thing that creates an insular situation where only the people who appreciate the way it used to be, enjoy it anymore. And I know there are certainly some people out there who would like that and don't want new fans and they want to be strictly catered to. But again, that's the kind of nonsense that bounced me off of comic books. Now, I have seen that a whole bunch of hot takes are up. I have not listened, watched, or read them because, well, I want to get my own thoughts out there, but also because I kind of don't want to sink into it. I know just from titles of videos, there are whole swaths of people out there who are treating this like it's a victory, as if Chibnall was an enemy to be defeated. And that's just a relationship with the creative end of a show that is so antagonistic that I kind of want no part of it. But here's what I'll say in terms of going forward. I will be very curious to see what the reaction is when Davies actually starts putting out episodes. Because I have a feeling that if he does what I expect him to do, and to do something different, and not just refresh and do what he did again, that there are going to be certain corners of fandom decrying how he's lost his touch and he's not as good anymore, many of whom will probably be willfully ignorant to how Davies actually ran the show before, like the fact that it used to be a bit campier than it got later on, and the fact that he had a lot of politics very baked in to a lot of the stuff that he wrote, and that his work since Doctor Who has only gotten more outright political. I will not be shocked to see certain folks within fan circles turn on Davies when they either realize properly for the first time or remember just how political this guy is and can be and has been and should be. He's good at it. Because Chibnall wasn't great on that stuff. So, again, Davies back because it's him. And again, not because I think he's the greatest thing ever. There were issues with his era. I would be happy to go over them if you want me to, but I'm trying to be as positive as I can right now, even with my concerns. But he's back, and I am kind of excited because of who he's become as an artist, as opposed to thinking, oh, he will bring back what it was before. I don't think he will, or at least I hope he won't, because I want him to do something new, because that's what I always want Doctor Who to do in some way, is to move forward and do something new. I really, really don't want to see people start speculating or saying that they should bring back an older actor to play the Doctor again. And yes, I know Day of the Doctor kind of very strongly hinted that that was a possibility that he could take on a face that he had before. I don't care. This is not about the continuity or whether or not it fits. It's about that stagnation that I talked about before, and about that wouldn't even be looking backward. That'd be staring up its own butthole if the show did that. So I swear, I just saw glimpses of headlines of speculation of either Tennant or Smith coming back. I'm like, no. I want to see what Davies will do. But the reason is because I trust him to do something new. Don't turn this into let's make it what it used to be. Those are my thoughts on Russell T Davies coming back to showrun Doctor Who. What are your thoughts? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Be polite to me, to Davies, and to Chibnall. I'm really sick of having to scrub comments that are absolute vitriol about a guy that the video I'm making isn't even about. Really sick of it. You can tell that that's kind of become a button for me. But as long as you don't do that, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I have a Patreon, and that is how I pay my bills, keep this whole operation up and running, and was able to afford that new computer I've spent the last couple days trying to get fully set up and everything the way I want it. But any amount you're able to assist is greatly appreciated. If you can't or don't want to use that, there's YouTube memberships. If you don't want to do that, like, share, subscribe, will help me out. You know what? Hit the bell. I never tell people to do that. Go ahead, hit the bell. But don't worry about that either. Because at the end of the day, You are the council. I'm only running the meetings, and until next time, this council is adjourned. This video wouldn't have been possible without the support of my patrons, and I want to give special thanks to Jared Boyce, MJ, The Doctor, Tracy Scrabbit, Vincent Paul Bartolucci, Kaylin Schwartz, Edelon, Robin Moore, Ross Schultz, and Shayla Gorley. Thanks so much.